Hey everybody, we are in Germany. We are in the west of Germany, in an area known as the Ruhrgebiet. It's the industrial heart of Germany, has been for decades. It's actually famous also from the Second World War, for instance, when major bombings happened in the area towards the end of the Second World War. Perhaps you know names of cities like Cologne and Düsseldorf. I'm near those cities right now. And so that means that I am in the temperate zone. We would expect the kind of vegetation that you see behind me. Mixed forest. I just drove through it. I can tell you it's mainly deciduous forest. We have a lot of very productive agriculture on the surfaces here on the landscape. And that is fitting given the climate. The industry in the region has one reason, and that is the very, very cheap availability of power back in the day. And I'm going to show you where the power comes from, and I'll be silent for a few seconds as I do that. So behind me is the source of that power over there at the very deepest point of this enormous open-air mine. That black stuff, as you hopefully guessed, is coal. Coal mining as an open-air activity happens in many places across the world, including in the United States. But this is one of the two main regions in Germany where that happens, and the availability of that coal explains the presence of this industrial heart of Germany, based on that cheap power. So clearly we should talk about the human impact on the landscape here because of how incredibly large this is. And I'm going to bet that so far you think, okay, it's pretty large, but I'm going to try and give that a bit of context for you. Where I am on the edge of this open air mine is about 100 meters above sea level. There, at the bottom, is 300 meters under sea level. So that's about 1,000 feet under sea level. The total altitude difference between me and the bottom of the pit here is therefore 1,300 feet, somewhat in the 400 meters elevation difference. So this is hugely deep. It is also enormously large. We're talking 85 square kilometers. Quick calculation here, it's about 40 square miles of area. That is being used here, and an absolutely enormous impact on the landscape. Of course, this being densely populated, fertile land. There were multiple villages that were in the way of this giant investment. In fact, there are several of these in the region, but I'll focus on this one right now. And all of them have led to the removal of villages and relocation of the folks that live there. Obviously with protest, but especially in earlier days, protest wasn't so successful. These days, and the continued operation of these mines is I would probably say threatened by the protests and threatened by the court cases brought by the protesters, who don't want their villages destroyed, and who are also against the ongoing ecological impact of a giant pit like this. The biggest thing you should imagine in terms of ecological impact, of course, is 300 meters under sea level. It is also dry. And we can keep it dry only by pumping incredibly much water out of the pit. And what that means is that also locally and even regionally, the groundwater is dropping. If you suck out all the groundwater from this enormous pit and all the way down to the level that you want to get the coal from, the lowest level, then that means that regionally you're sucking down the groundwater as well. And farmers, of course, don't like that from a production point of view. Forests dry out. That's actually one of the bigger reasons that we have these coniferous trees in this area. They don't mind a bit of drought, but deciduous trees mind it a little bit more. So that influence of the groundwater is felt more than 50 kilometers away from the edge of the pit, so 30 miles or so away from the edge of the pit. Really, really large ecological impact in the region through the process of sucking out water and drying out the rest of the landscape. So definitely controversial these days. I should add the global impact, of course, of continuing to burn coal. Burning coal, as you well know, leads to the emission of CO2, one of the gases that follow from burning the coal. And of course, there's too much CO2 in the atmosphere by a lot, and putting even more into it will lead to more issues. Global warming, more frequent storms, more frequent weather extremes in general, something that we really don't like. So I don't want to make this too long, but I do want to take a few more minutes and talk a little bit about the pit here. I hope you see those machines in there that are crawling through the landscape and taking away material and bringing it back. Those are absurdly large. I hope you have the time, and maybe I'll even pause this video. You'll have the time to Google image search for Bagger, B-A-G-G-E-R 593. That's one of those machines. It's the most famous one, and knowing its size will give you an impression for how enormously large this pit is. So the last thing I'll say is this crawls through the landscape. Of course, they don't just empty it all out and dump the material somewhere. They, in fact, dig on one side. This is that side where you can still see the original geological layering of something more orangey, fertile top material, and then about 200 meters thick, 250 meters thick of beachy sands before we get lower and lower in the geological section to the older and older materials and into the ultimate coals. If you look on the other side, the colors are much more mixed and jumbled, and that's because whatever we take over here gets dumped over there, and in the meantime we scratch away the coal from the bottom. Coal seams aren't that deep here, in the order of 10-20 meters if they're lucky, but that still contains a lot of coal, of course. The amount of material actually that's being excavated is much, much larger than the actual amount of coal, of course, that comes out of the pit. So a lot of transport from here to there, a little bit of taking away coal and moving it into the giant power plants that you may be able to see in the background from the, yes, you do see that, in the background from the clouds that they produce. So really, really cool stop, I think, here in Germany that I hope illustrates the enormous impact that we on occasion have on the landscape. All right, see you later.